Hey everyone, Brian from Watch Complications. Today we're at my workbench because we're going to be applying Lume to a few dials, and I'm just going to show you the real basics of it and talk through a couple things. So not a long video. I'm not dressed up fancy for you today, but this will also walk you through one of my latest projects on making custom dials, and this is the first one where I'm going to show you how I go about putting Lume, just hand applied Lume, nothing fancy. Everyone's going to be a little bit unique, but they look great when they're done. Let's get to putting some Lume on dials. Alright, so this is the custom dial I'm working on right now. I followed the printing process that I've shown in earlier videos in the Making Custom Dials series. So if you want to look back at how I do the pad printing on this, then look at those earlier videos. I'll link them in the description. So I've got sort of a dark gray base color. I've got white markers and numerals for the 12 and 24-hour track. And then my 10.6 logo on this one is printed in this specific green color that the customer wanted. And you can see that there's this custom second time zone cutout window. That's because of the movement going in this. And I'll show it when it's all put together as part of the video as well, just so you can see what the final watch looks like. So I have that dial. Let me show you one that I used as a prototype just to do testing with the shapes and stuff. This is all applied by hand, so this dial is basically done. But this is a prototype dial, and you can see that the second time zone window is a little bit wide at the top, so you can see the line of the wheel. That's not the case with this dial or another one that I have. So this was just a test to see, does the whole process work okay. You can see I've got the Lume applied. That's what we're going to work on today. Things I'm going to change will probably include a little bit longer rectangles, and I will make this T2 arrow a little bit smaller as well, a little bit more pointed. So that's what this will look like when it's all done. You see this even has the surface coat on it, so you can see the sort of the texture that I'm going for. But we're going to take this dial and make it look like this, or close to it regarding the Lume. And now again, I'm going to do this by hand, and that makes each one of these a little bit unique. There are going to be little quirks and slight imperfections in it, but that's, I'm making a custom watch dial by hand. So that's just a quality of it, we'll call it. I'm not necessarily striving for absolute perfection when it comes to the shapes, but I do want fairly straight lines, fairly concentric circles. So that's what we're going for. Let me show you the other dial I'm going to be applying this to today. And of course, the only difference with these two dials, both of these have the window cut the right width in terms of the second time zone, is this one has the custom color, this one has my silver applied logo. So this might be for myself or another customer, but this is the one that this client is really after, that I've built this dial for. So a few things I need in terms of the Lume application. Here's my little well to mix the Lume in. I've got a nice Swiss Lume powder. We're going with the green, and this is a little bit thinner, so I will mix a little bit of powder and a little bit of thinner. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio typically, and if you get a little bit too much thinner in there, you just leave it for a few minutes. This will slowly evaporate, leaving this a little bit more sticky. And then we've got the Lume applicator, which is kind of like an oiler. You can see it's quite thin, small. It's got a little bit of like a spatula sort of an end on it, so it can pick up whatever product we're wanting to place on the surface, and we'll pick up as much as I kind of want to and slowly apply it to the dial surface. Now once you put Lume on a surface, it starts to alter that surface and adhere to it, and so it will get sticky. You can really easily mess up the dial face if you aren't slow, meticulous, and careful about where you're applying the Lume, because once Lume has hit a particular part of the surface, that is going to be altered to a certain extent. Now I've got my pegwood in case I want to wipe some stuff off or use it, and my Rodico as always, again, same stuff if I want to wipe the applicator and keep dust particles and things away from the surface. And the Lume, got everything sort of right here ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the 2 triangles and the 3 rectangles, which are a lot more meticulous and take a lot more time. And I will then apply the circles. I will show you me applying a few of the circles, and as I'm doing that, I'll tell you how then I would go about doing, let's say, a triangle or rectangle as opposed to the circle. Circles are easy. So let's get to it. I decided I'm going to go ahead and show you one of these other shapes just because you can see I have the triangle at 12 applied, I have the triangle at T2 applied, and I have the rectangle at 9 applied. I'm going to show you how I do the rectangle at 6 since it's not a circle. Circles are real easy, and I'll show you those in a minute. So I am going to start with a circle though. So I'm going to get a dab of the Lume and put it on the marker that I printed to say this is center. And then I'll use this applicator to essentially drag that out to the corners and the sides that I want, get a nice thin layer in the shape that I want, and then I'll slowly start putting more Lume on and doing the same thing. So that's the process that I'm going to use to apply this by hand. So I'm going to start with just a little dab of Lume. I'll try to keep my head out of the way. And I'm going to put that right there on that dot. And all I want is a real little amount because I'm going to basically set the shape, because this Lume, when you apply it, is attracted to itself. And so if I can get a really thin layer in the shape I want, and I'll turn this on its side, I'll turn it flat, but essentially I'm going to drag this out to form corners. And you can actually get pretty straight edges, you know, by hand doing this. And then I'll drag down the middle. Again, it's a really thin layer right now. You got to be careful to keep your hands away from any other spots that you've loomed. You can see that I am essentially dragging this out to corners. It'll start to dry. Again, be careful with your fingers and hands as you're working around this, that you don't. I just keep my finger on the side here so I know I'm not interfering with anything I've already set. And I'll be, if I'm quiet for a few minutes, don't worry, you can just see me working here. Put a little bit more on here to work with. Again, I don't want a lot right now. I'm just establishing the boundaries for the Lume to get the shape that I want. And of course, until I get to the edge that I want, I don't really have to be too exacting or perfect with it. But then once I am to the edges, I will care a lot more. You just gotta keep your ratio of thinner to powder good, because this will evaporate. I'm putting a little bit in here just to get this Lume that I am working with a little bit closer to the consistency I want. Put a dabbing on there. Get enough to work with. Clean off the head a little bit. And then I can start dragging this one that has a little bit more viscosity to it. Into the shape I want. You can start to see it taking shape. Of course, I've got my magnification on so I can see quite detailed what it's looking like. Of course, the edges aren't perfect yet. I'll get them a little bit closer as time goes on, as I push and move it around a little bit. You can see every so often I drag out to the corners. That's again to keep adding definition to the corners and the sides, so that when I add the next dab of Lume on, it knows where to go. So here comes another nice dab in addition to it, like so. And you're going to put on a little bit more than you would want in the final result, because this will dry and the size will decrease a certain amount. So you don't want to put on just a little bit amount, because it will look like a lot less once it's dried more. So if I have little, you know, imperfections sort of just around the edges and stuff, that's That's okay, a lot of that will go away actually, since this is getting a matte clear coat. I just want this to be really close to what I want in terms of the edging, because it will kind of blend a little bit more once the clear coat goes on top and everything's got like a matte finish on it, including the lume. And don't worry, even if I put, UV resistant clear coat on top of this, the lume will work just fine in the light, both absorbing and producing light. I said it's a tedious process, and I wasn't planning on showing, one of these shapes, but I thought, well, why not? Why not? A lot of times people are going to apply markers that are lumed, which have edges on them, so you just basically plop a few dots of lume in it, and it goes out to the edges, and you just gotta, carefully not overfill it. Applying these markers by hand without any edges is, of course, a lot more tedious and involved, and does result in, each one being a little bit different and unique, and that's fine. I mean, this is a dial that has a ton of custom work into it. The custom second time zone cutout, the custom printing to different colors, lume, all hand applied. And through my own processes. And that is nothing to sneeze at. Well, you can sneeze at it, but turn your face away from the dial first. Of course, so what I care most about with this sort of a custom build is how's it look sort of with the naked eye daily wear. Oh, that's looking good. That's looking good. It looks like a rectangle, doesn't it? Again, you got to kind of know when to stop fooling with it. That's even something I still struggle with. It's like, okay, man, don't. It's good enough. Don't keep fiddling with it. Let it be. I'm going for as close to straight edges and concentric circles and straight sides as possible, but still showing that it is hand applied. Okay, that's what I go for whenever I do lume on watches, unless I'm using, applied markers that are lume filled. There we have it. And what I'll do is I'll look at it from the side and kind of judge the height compared to the other markers that I've applied. And if I feel like I need to add more height, that's easy to do. Just dab a little bit more on top. And again, it will find its home on top of the lume that's already set. And then I'm just going to even that out. So I put a little bit more on there. And I'll just drag it a little bit toward the corners. Just to give it some evenness, so it's not a big bubble in the middle. And now it's a little bit more in line with what I had on the 9. And there we go, that one is done. And hopefully you find that particular part helpful, showing you how I do other shapes than circles. Okay, I got one more rectangle to do, and then I'll show you some circles. All right, so as I mentioned, the circles are pretty easy, and that's all I've got left to do on this one. So I'm just going to get a dab of the lume, and then I'm just going to put it straight down on the circle. So what's nice about having these printed circles is I can know exactly where to drop this, and I just start kind of dropping it on top. So it's really just a matter of how big around I want them, how much height. Essentially, you just put it on, drop it, and that one's done. See, it's pretty easy to do. It's really just getting the circle started. And then, yeah, it's a matter of trying to get them all fairly equal in size, which again isn't too hard to do. Put that down, let it set for a second. And again, when you touch the loom with the bead of the applicator, it will generally just be attracted to itself. You generally don't have to do too much work. Essentially, the blob you've already got applied on there will pull in more off of the applicator. And then it's just getting the sizes that you want. Letting that dry. And so this will go fairly quick. Of course, these aren't always going to be absolute perfect circles, as if they were like machined markers or anything, but they are gonna look pretty good, to be honest, in the dark. You know, I'm not in a clean room, so sometimes you can get little specks of dust and stuff in there. And at this stage, it's wet enough, you can usually dip in and pull it out if you need to. You can also get little bubbles. You gotta pop sometimes. Just take your time, don't rush. Also, the loom will have a better effect if you have white behind it. So those little white dots not only will help with knowing where center is and where to apply them, but it will also help the loom do its job just a little bit better than if it was like a black background or something like that. Something to keep in mind if you were doing this yourself. Okay. So they're all on there. You can see the circles a lot faster. I'm going to trim some of the video, but I'll be looking at this and seeing, okay, are they all about the same size? And they are. It's actually looking pretty good for the moment. You know what? Looks pretty cool. It's going to look even better once it's finished. It'll lighten up just a hair and have a nice texture to it. So I hope you enjoyed this entry in the Making Custom Dials series. Check out my website, Watch Complications. Subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell if you want updates. And also check me out on Instagram at watch_complications. Keep watching, and I'll see you soon.